All right, so as miracles would have it, we used our little method and we cast on 20, which is what we were just talking about. And the tail is a fine length. You don't have to worry about this. If it's a little bit longer, it's going to be in your way. A lot of times if you leave it too long, you end up knitting it with it instead of with this. But this really isn't going to be in our way, or you're going to realize this isn't what you need. Okay? So this is your live yarn now. This is what you need right here.
When it is too long, though, it is easy to knit with. I cut mine at the beginning.
I did it the other day. So it happens. It happens all the time.
Cut it, knot it, do something.
Do something so you acknowledge that that's not the one you're using. So when we first start knitting, the best way, and maybe you have a different idea, Dawn, that you could say, when I knit, knitting is up. It's like an X to me. Okay, so I'll just knit and we'll talk about it. So your first stitch, and what you do have to watch with this first stitch, because it is loose, it has a tendency to come out a little bit. So you don't want it super, super tight, but do know that it will puff out a little bit or loosen up a little bit.
I tie a knot.
Oh, you do?
I knot that string.
Oh, okay. That's a good idea.
I've gotten burned a few times.
Okay, that's a good idea.
So I knot it so I know it doesn't slide out on me.
That's a good idea. Learning. Okay, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. See, I learned something today. So you're knitting. Your first stitch, we're going to knit everything. This week is just knitting. We're going to just do casting on and knitting. So you go in, you hold, it's like an X. Remember just to take the long one, not the little one, and you bring the yarn through the middle. Now you see, so you made a good point, Dawn, that this loosened up on me already because I didn't do anything to it. So this is really,
because you have to pull both. Yeah. If you don't knot it, you got to pull those at the beginning.
You got to pull and make that first one tight. All right, so let's knit, and it will be a little loose, that's okay. So we go in again, second stitch, through the middle, down and off. Up, yarn comes through the middle, down and off. And this is knitting. This is what you continue to do. Knitting, the yarn is always to the back. Okay, you go in through the front. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Okay, down like a T, and then you take that stitch off. In the very beginning, but the wood needles will hold your stitches on. You don't want to get too close to the top because you see that it's much more narrow. It'll make your stitches super tight when you transfer them. So kind of stay a little bit down from the tip.
And it's easy to slide off the top if you're too high up.
Yep, that's true too. Okay, up.
And you're moving from left to right. That was my hardest thing. I could never figure out which way I was going, what I was doing, and I'd have to call Debbie and say, help me.
And you know what? It doesn't matter if you're left-handed or right-handed. Just learn this way. There's not a right hand. There are people that do learn left-handed. No one can ever help you fix something unless they're a left-handed knitter. A lot of times they used to say unless they sat across from you because then they mirrored you. It doesn't show right hand or left hand. Just learn to knit doing it the regular way.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense, but okay. So I'm just going to go through this whole row.
And that's knitting. Once you know knitting and purling are the two basic stitches.
They are the two basic stitches that carry you through to everything. It's the other patterns, when you get this and you're comfortable with this, all it is manipulation of these two stitches.
Yep.
You'll see knitting two together, slipping a knit. They're just manipulations to make the pattern. You need to, that's why I always sit and do it like this. Sit on a couch. You can use your leg as a brace or my fat gut if I'm here. Whatever works. Okay, so you can see that now. The other thing too, if you notice how bigger this has gotten. So when you cast on the first row, it looked like it was about this big. when you knit it, it almost doubles out.
Yeah.
So when you say, somebody will say like, oh, you cast on 20 stitches and this is going to be a scarf. And you're like, wow, this is going to be the smallest scarf ever. It's really not, because these have increased in size. And so if you were doing a scarf with 20 stitches, most times you will be using more than 20. You can see how much larger it has become. And you would just, so then you turn it. Your right needle is always blank because you're transferring, right, from left to right.
It's always left to right.
Start the thing again. Now, the second row, once you hooked this, it becomes better.
Right.
The one thing you want to do is you want to get in here, not in here. A lot of times people you do this at the end, and I'll show it to you when I get to the end, because that's how you end up with an increased amount of stitches. So if you cast on 20, and this also got looser. So if you're doing a straight run and you're doing a project with 20 stitches and all you're doing is knitting, maybe like every 8 rows or something, just count your numbers every 5 rows, maybe in the beginning, maybe every row.
I'd say every row at the beginning. I used to lose stitches all the time.
So, and you see, this has already loosened up. So it's much easier to slide. It's not, the first row is always a little tighter. I can move this down, and I just want to show you when we get to this last little stitch that always has like a loop to it. So the ends, so you have to, well, actually this didn't really do it. So this was fine. Sometimes people go into here or they think it's another stitch.
That's why I'd count.
Yeah.
Count your 20.
So this is where this is going to be problematic for people. So you're going to say, well, do I go into that and then that? No. You always turn it so that it's...
Pull your tail.
Yeah. And maybe an easier way to remember is this, the work is always to the inside for now. Okay? So if it's facing this way, you're going to go in here and maybe here. That's not the way. Your seam is facing towards you, or towards the middle, okay? You're not going here, you're going right next to the needle.
Yeah.
And you're just, this is knitting.
That's it.
This is it. This is it. So we're gonna, okay? So at least you have this as a reference. You can see that when I get comfortable, I kind of start to turn it, so it maybe doesn't look like it's going up. It's still the same.
That's how I knit.
Yeah.
I kind of knit sideways.
Yeah, so it's, I'm almost holding it exactly sideways now and going up into it, where when we first started to show you it was like this. It's whatever your comfort becomes. Okay?
Yep. Just make sure you go front to back.
Yep, front to back. It's almost like an X. Make sure when you slide it, you come in, you slide it all the way off. And that's it. All right, so we're gonna call and keep practicing that, and that's it. You can use your thumb to keep your stitches in place so they don't slide, but the wooden needles are pretty good. They really don't, slide too much. You want to start out in the very beginning with a smooth yarn. You don't want to get one of those yarns that's real
alpaca-like,
bubbly, and yeah, you want to stick with something smooth because it's easy to see the stitches this way. You can see that they're very defined. When you get to those yarns that have texture to them and stuff, they're very difficult to work with and difficult to see. And this is it. So your whole pattern will look like this. Some stitches in the beginning will be super nice looking. Some stitches will be a little higher. Don't beat yourself up. Take the time, do your 20 stitches and maybe do 20 rows. Look at it. You can talk to us about it as well. Continuity is a good thing, but continuity is not going to be great in the beginning, and maybe it will be. Okay, so it's just about getting comfortable and getting the feel for it and enjoying it. You're becoming a yarn whore. All right, lesson number 1.